Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Laura Greeley, Regional VP of IEB Southeast Asia and India. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest of our Volve Webinar series. This week, we turn our attention to data-informed strategies and how to leverage data to drive business results. This topic in session has been curated by members of our Data and Analytics Committee. I would like to say a huge thank you to Rupesh Kumar, Associate Client Director of CARA, Catherine Candano, Head of Strategic Data Partnerships Development at Google, and David Whitley, Head of Analytics and Technical Solutions at MIQ, for curating today's session. With a wealth of data available, it can be difficult to know how to leverage this to drive real business results. Today, we're delighted to hear from NTUC Income, Microsoft, and CNN International to understand how they've extracted actionable customer insight from their own data. This panel discussion, which is moderated by Catherine Candano, from Google, will delve into where each organization is in its data journey, what are some of the learnings and pitfalls to avoid, as well as how success and value to their business is measured. With an eye in the future, we also take a look at what these leading brands are focusing on in 2021 to deliver personalized customer experiences, as well as delivering against their individual business objectives. This is an interactive session, so please do feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A function, which is available on your screens. Kathy, welcome, and thank you for moderating this session. Without further ado, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, everyone, and I'm really excited to be here to open a topic and a panel that is very close to my heart. Today, we're joined, everyone, by a panel of industry experts to join a conversation. And we're going to pull back the curtain on data strategies that have helped them rise above and deliver on business trajectories during a collectively challenging time this 2020. So let me take you through the panel that we have today. First, we have Eliot Connor. He's Digital Commercial Director for Asia Pacific of CNN and responsible for digital for CNN across Asia Pacific, driving innovative and effective solutions across a range of new ad products and relationships. And this taps on 2 decades of his digital marketing experience across a range of solutions, from direct sales and programmatic trading across Asia for CNN International. We're also joined by Anupam Dikhit, who is the head of digital, social, and experiential marketing for Microsoft across the Asia Pacific region. He is very passionate about correlating data-driven insights with consumer behavior to keep pace with the ever-changing digital ecosystem. We're also joined by Anny Huang today, who is the head of digital business for Income. She's Deputy Vice President for the insurer and has a very strong passion for digital and data. At Income, her role is quite interesting in that she ensures her channel on digital contributes as much as possible across all the other channels that are driving their business, and data has a big hand to play in helping her achieve that. So I'd love to introduce you to the panel and kick off. Feel free to say hello, everybody. So before anything, I'd love to just kick off by saying everyone's journey in data is different. In fact, each of the organizations have their own DNA that brings them from a journey when they're nascent in how they're connecting and collecting data and using it to a more mature work. But it all starts from somewhere. And so I'd love to open the panel today by asking a question around how did your journey begin with data in your organization? Maybe, Annie, you could kick us off by sharing a bit more about the journey from typically a quite robust insurer that has been pivoting to digital really quickly in such a short time. Annie?
Hey, hi guys. Can you hear me, Kathy?
Yes, loud and clear.
Awesome. Okay, so I think our journey is rather interesting because most traditional FSIs will have a robust data team and data strategy, but we started actually with a business challenge. So it was more of a bottoms-up strategy for us. So the data strategy came actually from marketing instead. So we have a business challenge that we want to resolve, and then we kind of formulate the entire data strategy from that perspective with some of the angles that we have in mind, and then we start building it from scratch. You can imagine how difficult it is because my team started with 0 data people in the team, and we just get our hands dirty, try to do something about it. Even with basic tracking on the website, we didn't have anything. So we really started from scratch. And thinking back now, it took us about 3 years to get to this stage, and I do think that it's rather impressive for personally. Yeah. Cathy.
I'm really surprised to hear that your journey actually started with 0 data people. And that's really an important part of the journey, right? Is having the investment. I'm curious to hear more about how you move from 0 to the number that you have today in 3 years, and how does that look like from an investment of your leadership?
Okay, so we literally built everything from scratch. And I think it's important to have the leadership that endorse your idea. And we started with a business challenge, and we just went around the organization to get endorsement from everybody. And it's very fortunate that we have a very supportive CMO who believes that no point telling people how do I feel about this thing. For marketing, a lot of time it's about subjective and subjective feeling about whether this ad is nice, that ad is nice, and whether they are driving the kind of revenue we need, right? So we decided to move away from whether this creative is better or not. We use data to tell us so. So a lot of times, in the past we were struggling with that. So we started checking every single thing we do and ensure that we are able to have a more constructive conversation with the senior leadership by proving with data. So in the last 3 years, we managed to kind of have a goal for us, and now we are able to, whoever asks us, we're able to give a CPA target that we have in mind across different business line and different segment of audience. And it's no longer about arguing with them, do you need to give me another $1 million for spend? We just prove you with the revenue results that we are showing. So I think that is kind of the aggressive goal that we have in mind in day one, and then we just went through the journey with that. And currently, I have two data scientists in the team. To me, it's still very lean, but these are the people, these 2 guys, able to actually help me to merge the offline and online data together and giving me that single view and helping us to bridge the gap between digital and offline. You can imagine how difficult it is in insurance because we are definitely being seen as a channel conflict for all our agents on the road. And we have to use data to prove to them that, all the things that we're doing in digital marketing and in digital sales channel, we are handing over the leads to them. We are helping them to nurture the customers for them. So these are the things that can only be done with data as a backbone to support us and provide them with results to showcase how we are helping them along the way.
It's so interesting because I'm hearing 2 types of conversations happening. One, internally within your organization to say, I have the CPA that proves the marketing works and the marketing drives insurance policies. On the other hand, you also have another conversation within your own sales teams, whether it's the digital sales, which is your website, or it's your sales from your agents in the coffee shops across the country who are talking to people about protection for their families and telling them that digital works for them too. It's quite interesting how you're having all these conversations, Annie, and I'm just curious how much of it is close to where you want it to be. Is it near to where you want it to be, or do you still feel that there's more in store around the corner for you?
Definitely more, a lot more. It's my tagline in the company is never enough. You can ring the song in your mind now. So I would say that we are probably at 30% of what I imagined it, the end result that I want to be. And it's a lot of hard work from a very small team of mine. And I would say that if I can solicit a lot more supports from other departments, obviously we can move a lot more faster. So the end goal is really hoping that one day, even when the customer is doing some random research or walk into a branch, I'm able to customize my offering to the customer the moment the customer step into the branch. So all this all these have to be powered by data, right? Because I need to study the customer before even the customer step in. So it's no longer about after I speak to you, then I try to customize something for you. It's literally you have to predict what they need even before they decided to connect with you. So I would say that will be the nirvana that I want, in the end of the tunnel.
It's super interesting how you started off with no people, now you have a team, now you also have a bigger vision of anticipating the customer journey that is offline when you actually own the digital channel. I'm actually curious to know how much of that similarity of that experience is something that, Anupam in Microsoft is at all across. Is there any similarity or is there a difference in your experience and your data journey, Anupam, from Annie's?
I think Anupam might be having some technical difficulties. If you move to Eliot, then we'll be able to get Anupam back online.
Sounds good. Eliot, would you like to chime in on what it's like behind the scenes at CNN? Is it similar at all to the journey that Annie expressed, even if you are from two different worlds? She's from an insurer and you're from the publishing and broadcasting business.
Hi guys, thanks Kathy. So look, I think CNN as a publisher is very different to an advertiser. And I think that the main difference being is that we're not just looking at our advertiser partners or how we're looking to use data for advertising, but as much we're looking to use it for content and our consumers. So, we've got millions of consumers coming to our websites every day looking for news, political, business. We cover a range of a vast amount of subjects. But we need to understand what it is that the consumers are looking for in terms. So the first thing we always look at is how do we keep our audience engaged? How do we keep them on the website? How do we keep providing them the right type of content? So I think for first and foremost, CNN as a company will also always look to protect our audience and make sure that that's the first and foremost component of what we're doing. We're then using data tools. So we're using brands like Ipsos, GWI, Comscore, Bombora. There's an endless list of how we then understand that data point to convert it into something which is meaningful to advertisers. And I think, the one thing that I've noticed in the 20 years that I've been doing digital marketing is that there's millions of signals, there's millions of data points out there. But it's trying to find out what's meaningful for you as a brand and meaningful to your partners. Because I think there's still too many brands who are building data sets because they can, opposed to thinking about what is the value of this data set and how is it going to grow either my business or how is it going to help my partners to grow their business. And I think at CNN, we've kind of constructed a very well-meaning, thought-out opportunity, which was starting at a different level. So as opposed to thinking, what can we build? We were thinking, what do we want? And then working backwards from that to build out the right type of audiences, the right type of data segments. And again, this goes across editorial and content, as well as what we can provide for our partners. And we're constantly evolving this. We're constantly building new products. Even last year we built a product called SAM, S-A-M, which stands for Sentiment Analysis Moderator. And that was in view of the changing market perceptions about brand safety. So we work with hundreds and thousands of brands around the world who are concerned about news in particular because of the type of content that we might cover. But what we've noticed is that brands have got a little bit too, not disconnected, but they've got very protective about what they kind of view as brand damaging. But what we're kind of trying to enthuse them about is that actually we know more about our content than anyone else does. So we need to enable us to kind of power that. So we built an algorithm so that we understand the context around content. Now, whilst that works for behavioral and for advertising, it also means that we can build the content and the editorial surrounding that to better work with our audience and the consumers that we have on a daily basis. And I think, to Annie's point, where I think, 30% done. I think we're still 1% done. And what's going to change that will depend over the next 2 years, because, we know that Google, yourself, there's a lot of things changing with Chrome. So there's a lot of things changing with third-party cookies. So I don't know what's coming around the corner, and I won't put you on the spot to ask you what you think is going to come around the corner, but things will change. And I think brands need to make sure that they're thinking about that and adapting to that. And whether it's data about behavior, whether it's data around content, whether it's data around purchase. I think as long as you're thinking about what the value is to use your business, I think it's important.
I'm curious to hear more about the behind the scenes look on how your teams are organized. Do you have teams that are owning the data and basically people come to them when they need understanding of content and behavior and audiences? Or is it something that is across the organization and there are champions, for example, who are leading stakeholder discussions? Because what I'm hearing from Annie is there are parallel stakeholder management discussions that are happening to make sure that people appreciate that the data is credible and speaks to value. So I'm curious, on a publisher side, is it also the same? Do you also have similar internal conversations that you must have?
I mean, everyone holds data, right? I mean, we've got different divisions around the company. We have editorial, we have data specialists who, by the name hold the data. But, we also have Create, which is our creative department. We have Reach, which is looking at amplifying content. We have Launchpad, which looks at social. There's signals that are coming from all of these different departments. And do we store all of it? Absolutely not. I think it's impossible. But do we have people who are specializing in trying to get as much of it as we can? Yeah. And that team is someone that we speak to on a regular basis in the ad sales team. Because when we work with brands, I think we're trying to switch from a placement first into an audience first understanding. So understanding what the audience is, who they're looking to target and why. And I think we're also trying to shift away from, I wouldn't say meaningless, but very digital metrics, such as CTR. And, I still think that engagement is a very kind of vanity digital metric. And think about how we can kind of shift that into business results. We're not there. I don't think we're 100% done, and I don't think there's many companies that are. But I think what we think about is, how do we commit a brand to looking at purchase? How do we commit a brand to looking at brand uplift? What is it that is meaningful to that brand, and how do we adapt that into our media planning? And I think it comes with data, and it comes with an audience strategy. And that could also be against content as well. So a lot of the brands that we work with are building content using our platform just to amplify. And I think that's important, because the content is going to be, I think, a big signal in understanding what the consumer journey is. So the more we understand about what they're looking at and understanding why, means that we can then adapt the messaging that we're showcasing or offering to these clients to make sure that they're going in a certain direction.
It sounds like you're very much joined in the hip between the commercial side and your data folks. And this is across all the signals that you have in the organization. I'd love to actually probably now shift to Anupam, if you're there and joining us on the call. I'm curious to hear how much of this shift that Eliot is talking about from, marketing being focused on the lighter metrics, the media metrics, to actual business results, and how much of the Eliot and the Annie experiences are actually portable or translatable, if any, to Microsoft.
Great. Let me first do a sound check. Can you guys hear me okay?
You sound perfect.
Awesome. Tell everyone. So I think that's another part of surviving in a digital world, where there's always a possible sound check that's not working around the corner. So Kathy, thanks for your question. I think if I could just take a couple of steps back and look at our overall digital journey, I think being from an organization that predominantly sells digital products, I think we started on a digital journey quite a long time ago. I wouldn't say, though, that we've arrived yet to where we want to be. I think we're still progressing, but we've evolved as we've come along the way. What has changed predominantly has been our focus on what data points are most relevant and how we are going about collecting those. and also trying to look at everything from the lens of the end customer and then building out from that. I think that focus has also been an integral part of our digital transformation as an organization. And I know digital transformation is a word that's thrown about a lot these days, but it can actually mean everything from, hey, I've implemented a CRM system, to actually having a fledged, natively built process and platform for actually engaging with your customers. So there's a wide chasm between starting off and actually having a fully digitally transformed organization. And I think we've been on that journey, and we've reached a point now where we have a lens into every marketing action that we undertake. And all of those are driven from our business objectives and built with, like I mentioned, keeping the customer at the center. So at some point, we were obviously looking at just advertising metrics. So what's our CTR, or what's our CPM, and how many clicks, how many people are landing, how many converting, and so on. But I think we've gone a few steps upstream from that, and another major reason for that is we also, being predominantly a business-to-business or a B2B company, we also have to look at it from the lens of the customers or the accounts that we focused on. There's a large number of accounts that we work with across the region. And for us, it's about what's the cut through, both from a business and from an engagement standpoint, that we have with each of those organizations, and also looking at it from the lens of who within the organization are we engaging with. So a lot of our digital focus around data is driven by trying to understand how well are we engaging with these very specific accounts that we want to engage with. So for us, it's not as much about reaching out to the entire audience base that possibly exists in the region, but actually looking at it from a very surgical precision, and taking into account the ones that we have at various stages of engagement, and how can we then move them further. So it's a very similar parallel to the advertising funnel, which most e-commerce marketers or practitioners would be aware of, but we sort of try and take it at a slightly larger level and look at it from an account conversion as opposed to a conversion of an individual customer. A lot of the metrics are similar, but they're not the same. So I would say they're slightly more aggregate, more from a business standpoint as opposed to just a media or a marketing standpoint. And we then look at the entire customer journey as you would otherwise as well from just an advertising lens. But in this case, it's more in terms of how are we engaging with different stakeholders across those organizations through every touch point that they interact with us. Now, these touch points pre-COVID could have been offline, could have been digital, but given where we are today, I think all of them have moved to being digital touch points. So with that comes a lot of new data points, a lot more data, and as Peter Parker said, with a lot more power comes a lot more responsibility. So I think that's one of the key focus areas that we have internally. So we're very focused on ensuring that we manage customer data very responsibly and compliantly, given that there are a lot of issues that you can potentially run into if it's not done the right way. So I think we've reached a stage where we realize the importance of the data that we manage. And this is obviously about our customers and how we need to deal with it to not just derive insights, but also ensure that it's taken care of responsibly.
I find it really interesting that there's a lot of similar themes that I'm hearing from you, which is around data, insights, and how data and insights actually connect more to understanding and relationships, whether it's understanding of customer journey or relationships with customers. And what's interesting is you've brought us to the current situation where we're in, which is 2020. In 2020, a lot of things has changed, as you mentioned, Anupam, and the pandemic is one of those interesting things that have happened to us in 2020, and we're still in it. But I'm really curious now to pivot the audience and our panel to think about your experiences this year. how has data helped you or shaped the way you respond, if any, to the challenges in this current time? Or has there been any silver lining from the situation we're in today, and has data helped you? I'm curious to throw that over to actually Eliot to hear a bit more about what's it like in a publisher reporting on the news of this in this current time. How has data helped?
I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think everyone kind of came into January, February this year and was not expecting what happened in 8 months. So I think everyone's kind of thrown back a little bit. But again, as I mentioned, having the content and having the signals of understanding what people are looking for helped us adapt very quickly. So, I mean, there are probably two things which I'll kind of mention. The first one is that, you know, we did a podcast called Facts versus Fears with Sanjay Gupta. And this was kind of based on the trend that, firstly, we could see that we were getting a spike in our audience numbers, who globally people were coming to us to learn the truth about COVID-19, to understand more about what was going on, what was happening. And we utilized that data to build this response and this podcast. And we utilized the podcast knowing that it was a wide demographic of people that wanted to understand it, but also that it was the podcasts which were the growing trend of our consumers. So we built it and it kind of responded incredibly well. But the main one, I think, which was really important, and this was complete fluke. You know, I mentioned that our audience numbers skyrocketed this year, and they're still 30-50% bigger than what they have been in the past. But we started looking at the data, and there was one channel that in particular called Impact Your World, which was growing a lot faster than the rest of the website. And it was actually up about 300-400% above normal. And we were trying to figure out why, because we don't have it in the main nav, and it's actually not the easiest channel to find. But when we actually looked at the content that was being built in Impact Your World, we could actually understand that it was actually good news content. So the content was actually surrounding people wanting to find out good information about COVID-19 or just in general, because I think there was so much negative news in the world at the time, that be that around the pandemic, or be that around the forthcoming recession, be that about the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, there were so many things that I think people were consuming and coming away fearing for the world, I guess, that they were looking actively for good news. So once we understood the signal, we actually adapted the sentiment analysis tool that I just mentioned, the SAM tool, which was about, and it was built for brand safety. But because we were understanding the context of the content, and we understood, you know, is this content positive, negative, or neutral, it meant we could actually create an ad tool around it. So we can actually now bring out an opportunity to advertisers and partners that gives them the capability of targeting only good news, because we can say that we're seeing that consumers are looking for good news, you know, and they're actively pursuing that. And, you know, advertisers can work around that and be part of the message. So that was something that was really cool. And that happened at the beginning, or about March time. And like, that's something that we talk about a lot at the moment.
It's super fascinating, Eliot, that you bring up this unexpected new organic surge in readership, but also that it opened up new business opportunities for people to really hone in on that consumer behavior and try to engage in that space where people are really actively searching for good content and good news content. It's super fascinating. Would never have thought a publisher has that pulse on an audience, but CNN does. I'm curious to now pivot to Anny, and in the insurance industry, how has your experience been like so far in 2020, and has data helped you or surfaced any interesting experiences that you'd love to share for us today?
It's really a difficult year for everyone, especially, so ours is slightly different from what Eliot shared, and simply because we have a large force of agents on the road, and can you imagine the 2 months of circuit breaker, they couldn't meet any of the customers, and that's the largest revenue stream for us. So what we pivoted using data during that period of time is to help them nurture the customer and continuously engaging the customer using data, and help them to ensure that once circuit breaker is is over, they are able to have a topic to talk to the customer. So during that period of time, our marketing team quickly used data to pivot a campaign. We launched a campaign, Emerge Stronger, to tell everybody, stay stronger, we'll emerge together. And then at the same time, for me, digital business, we lost a large chunk of revenue due to travel insurance is totally from multi-million to zero. You can imagine how bad it is for my channel, and we have to quickly use data to pivot other business line online so that we continue to able to meet the growth target that the company has and continue to serve the needs of the customer. And we also use data to discover what the customer are looking for during this pandemic time. Obviously, interesting fact for all of you guys is actually every pandemic people will look into insurance. It's a time of reflection that people start reviewing their insurance portfolio and start buying more. So we use kind of SARS period data to guide us in certain decisions during this pandemic as well. This is definitely much worse than SARS period, and we kind of use some of the data to come up with bundled packages to help our customer, and also make sure that they take advantage of this stay-at-home period to review all their financial needs. And I would say that without data, we couldn't have done any of this. Imagine we didn't start on the data journey 3 years ago, start collecting all the signals that we have about customers, we wouldn't be able to do all these things today.
It's super fascinating that insurance, there's two types, right? Very digital, very offline. And at this stage, when people are looking at health crises, they're also asking themselves, what should I be doing next? And it seems like this situation, you've used data from past experiences to guide your next steps. It's really fascinating, yeah. Annie. Did you expect this?
Not really. I was expecting a lot of sales to be totally gone, and I was expecting customers to be afraid about spending their money. But it's really fascinating for me that actually Singaporeans generally are quite well educated in protections and getting their family well covered and things like that. So I would say that 2 months of circuit breaker give them a lot more time at home to really review their needs. And we quickly pivoted a digital channel for the advisors as well. So we ensure that they are able to use some of the data that we churn out for them to continue the conversation with the customer, even via digital means. So I would say that all this was a surprise for me, because I thought it will be really tough. You should expect that, it took us many years to digitally train all our advisors when some of the advisors are older. And this pandemic kind of accelerated that in 300% speed. They are forced to use the digital means, use data to guide their selling process. In the past, they would say that I know the customer better than you. I will know what to sell to the customer. But now, due to all these issues, they have to rely more on data to guide their principles and guide their choice. Yeah.
And the data that they're relying on is digital data, not just
a lot of digital
data that they collect in the coffee shops.
Yeah. So it's a merger of online, offline data to kind of give a better profile of the customer so that they know what exactly to sell them during this period of time.
It's really interesting, because it also seems like even if there's different kinds of data signals available, the digital data in particular and your historical view of the data that you had before, it seems it's helped you a lot. I'm also curious to know in Anupam's world, where it's B2B, they managed to develop software, and that is the what they put in hands of organizations. How is that business process actually accelerated or decelerated in your current experience in this 2020? Has data helped at all, and digital data in particular? Noting what Annie has said, digital data helping the offline.
So Kathy, I think that's a great question. I think the biggest difference between offline and digital data is digital is far more pervasive and available at a much higher frequency. Offline data would have a certain lag, whether it's a week or a month, but digital is almost instant gratification, right? So you would know at any moment if a customer has engaged, not engaged, reacted, not reacted, and what, like I think we discussed earlier, that we could even literally predict what would be the next reaction or action that they're going to take. So if I look at from a very Microsoft lens, I think it's been a sharp learning curve for quite a few of us internally as well, ever since the pandemic struck, because there's an inherent reluctance for trying out anything new, right? And that's sort of that's very natural. And I think we've been on a journey as well over the last 6 to 8 months in terms of getting people across the organization up to speed from how they start loving data and embracing it instead of trying to fear it. I think one of the things that helped is given all data was predominantly coming in from digital channels and sources, we had systems in place to process and make sense of that. So the challenge was less about getting them to embrace it, more about trying to get them to use those systems and processes and use them to drive business decisions. So having that lens and perspective in terms of being able to look at customer engagement and then make sense of it in terms of seeing what channels or tactics are working and for which sets of audience. That enables us to have those cuts and segments in terms of the audiences that we want to reach with specific tactics or to drive specific objectives. So if we have certain accounts which are further down the sales process, and that reminds me, the other bit that has helped is the integration with sales dashboards. So we get an end-to-end view of the entire customer journey, right from the point where probably ad or a creative is shown to the user or a cookie is dropped, right until the point where as an organization, they decide to convert and they decide to partner with us across any of our business units or services. So having that full lens end to end then allows us to sort of put in surgical measures at different stages and figure out, okay, if we do an experiment here, let's see how that tweaks thing, or looking backwards saying this specific action happened because of these downstream events. And therefore, if we could do more of that, it would have X, Y, and Z implications. So having that data accessible has been a revelation. I think that's what's really moved the needle in terms of being able to shift that perception. I think the key question here, the key determinant here is value. As whenever we see value that we can get, an inherent value that we can get out of whether it's data or any other thing. And the same when consumers interact with platform and share data, they do that only because they get value. And the same thing happens from a marketing lens as well, is that when you see value in data that's coming in a certain format, you start to use that more. So for us internally, it was more about showcasing that value. And then that's definitely helped move the discussion.
I think it's really interesting that you ultimately land on the concept of value, Anupam, because ultimately that is what we're trying to create with all our strategies on data, right? It's the business value that we can unlock that are closer to sales, that are closer to actual relationships with customers. Now,
absolutely,
if I can take this time to, in a way, like move us everyone back into a more reflective mindset, I will also use this time to open up questions from the audience. I'm curious, if you could talk to yourself at the beginning of 2020, imagine you're at the beginning of 2020, what would you have told yourself if you had all this hindsight and learning from your data journey, from your 2020 journey so far? Would you do anything differently? Would you tell yourself to do anything differently? And I'm aware of a question in the audience around stakeholder management. Would you manage your stakeholders differently to get further in your data journey, especially if they're afraid of data?
So I can understand people being afraid of data. Yeah, I mean, I can go first. People being afraid of data. I think there was a dialogue in The Matrix. Denial is the most predictive of all human responses. So yeah, sorry, I keep dropping these movie lines everywhere. So it's normal. It should be expected. So I think if I look back to the beginning of 2020 and maybe a couple of years before that as well, I thought I was late to get onto the digital curve. And you would get clues if you are really close to the consumer. So consumers are, I would say, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but I would say consumers are always ahead in terms of embracing technology than marketers. We're mostly usually playing catch up in terms of figuring out what their consumer behavior is or is going to be, and then adapt accordingly. They are the ones who are shaping the narrative. So looking at consumer behavior, we would say that the amount of data that's being created over the last decade, we would have got to a point where there was no way out other than embracing data to the fullest extent, right? So I think all the signs or the data signals were there. So yes, I think stakeholder management, and especially ensuring that there is visibility and appreciation of the value that having a better understanding of data brings to us from a business impact, decision making, and obviously from a marketing lens, would have possibly helped us to ramp up faster and maybe leverage the opportunity that the pandemic persisted. I want to say that I think while the pandemic has been unfortunate, and it's turned our whole world upside down, but I don't think there's been a better time to be a digital marketer than now. And I'm sure everybody is feeling that because the whole world moving digital, it's almost like whether you're already there or whether you're catching up.
I never thought I would hear someone say this is the best time to be in digital marketer, but I'm curious, is this the best time in our generation to be in data as well? And probably this is also to add on to Eliot and to Annie, to what Anupam shared. I'm curious to know what your lessons are to yourself and managing and partnering with stakeholders. That's two sides of the coin, right? And they may not understand the value of data that it proposes to add to the organization. So again, I'm quite curious to hear.
I'll go next. I think that the big change for us is that, again, something which is fundamentally shifted globally, which we couldn't expect, was that people are going to start working from home. And that's kind of meant that beforehand, we've had gatekeepers around data. We've had departments, we've had headcount, we've had people. Now they're working from home. We haven't had systems and platforms in place. I think if I could have gone back, or if we could have gone back, to the end of last year and kind of give ourselves a heads up that this was going to happen, I think it would be making the data more accessible internally to the team, to make sure that we know more about it, to see how we could figure that out through systems and platforms. Because we're just so used to going over to a data team or a data specialist and asking them, okay, right, this is my need, this is my request, this is my want, and having them come back to us with a solution. Not having that connectivity face to face and in the human personality, we're now blocking people's time. So we're kind of messaging them saying, hey, are you free in the next 2 weeks? And like finding out that they're free for 20 minutes, next Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. just isn't helpful really. So I think the big thing from us or from our side would be, how do we make that data easily available through systems and platforms?
For my slightly different from what the two gentlemen just shared, right? If I go back to last year, end of last year, I would say that I should be a bit more tougher and harsher with my IT teams. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I think, we were under the impression, or rather happy with what we have at the end of last year or even in the beginning of this year. And as pandemic happens, we realized that I should have pushed them harder to get all my offline data as well, since now I literally lost all offline means to touch base with our customers. I should have pushed them really hard, to get all the offline data in a single location. That we haven't really done that 100% at this point of time. My challenges is slightly different from Eliot. We do have access to majority of the data in the organization, even we are working from home, and that helped us really a lot in this pandemic period. As back to the stakeholder part of the question, right? I think we're happy that the team here has been trying to go around the different departments to share the benefits of why we need to embark on a data journey. So to the audience in this call today, right, I want to advise you that, do not afraid that you are not from the data team, you are not from the BI team. It doesn't matter. If you have a problem statement, just be brave and ask for it. Perhaps you will get it. I mean, when we started, right, we are from marketing, we have no insights team, and we thought we're not going to get anything. But it's because we have a problem that we need to address. We have a business that we need to answer. So we go in with a aggressive ask, and we got it from endorsement from everybody in the senior leadership. So it's really, don't afraid of starting something small. Just ask for it, and maybe you will just get it.
I'm curious, did you ask for anything, Annie, in 2020?
I did.
That you dared to get for data?
You can imagine majority of the marketers' budget are cut, right? We are very fortunate we didn't get cut and we still got incremental budget, simply because of all the work that we have done in the past that kind of proved to the leadership that every single dollar they're giving us, we are able to generate something back to them. So all these are definitely powered by data. Otherwise, at this time of the year, probably everybody is trying to cut everybody's budget, right, in the organization. And we are the only team kind of keep out of that framework now, because the CFO is well educated on how we derive our CPA. So she said, okay, let's not touch her budget. She can generate revenue. Yeah.
So maybe the solution to navigating and partnering with stakeholders is using data to do the talking for you.
Definitely.
So I think we're at time, everyone. This was such a lovely conversation, but also a very serious and uplifting conversation at the same time. Serious because we're in the middle of the pandemic and we still are experiencing austerity in our industry, but uplifting because it seems like there are a few that have figured out that maybe this is the best time to do tinkering on the data side. And I know, Anupam, there was a conversation we had before around this topic on maybe this is a good time to also think about ourselves as marketers, as data practitioners, and think about where we want to go in our own journey and in the organization, thinking what else should we ask for, as Annie said. And in Eliot's perspective, also think about how much do we share, how much is accessible. So with that, I'd love to say thank you to this amazing panel. You've been very open, very insightful, and very frank. And I'd love to invite Laura to come back and help us close out our webinar. Laura?
Thank you guys so much. I have pages of notes written. This was super insightful. The questions from the audience were fantastic. I hope that we've managed to be able to answer most of them through the different conversations and the sharings. Anupam, Eliot, Annie, and Catherine, thank you all so much. I do hope that you'll join us again on another webinar, and thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.